Hello, friends. This is the Alphalist podcast. I am your host, Toby. The goal of the Alphalist podcast is to empower CTOs with the info and insight they need to make the best decisions for their company. We do this by hosting top thought leaders and picking their brains for insights into technical leadership and tech trends. If you believe in the power of accumulated knowledge to accelerate growth, make sure to subscribe to this podcast. Plus, if you're an experienced CTO, you will love the discussion happening in our Slack space where over 600 CTOs are sharing insights, or visit one of our events. Just go to alphalist.com to apply. Welcome to the Alphalist podcast. I am your host, Toby, and today we are talking about platform engineering at SIXT, a 100-year-old company that has a very modern approach to platform engineering. And I welcome Boyan Dimitrov, the CTO of SIXT, who is, I don't know. I guess everyone knows SIXT. Everyone had a car rented from SIXT, but not many people know about the tech stack there. So it's quite interesting to talk about that. SIXT is actually 8,000 people and 800 in tech, which is amazing. Boyan, do you want to add a few things?
Hi, Toby. Thanks for having me. That's actually a great introduction to us. As Eric SIXT would say, we are pretty much a tech company with a car rental attached to it. And what you just mentioned, I think underlines the amount of passion and investment we do in technology and the way we work.
Okay. So for how long are you with SIXT personally?
Clocking in 9 years as we speak.
And you made it from working in DevOps basically to the CTO seat now. Is that correct?
Kind of. I've always been all-arounder, let's put it that way. When I joined SIXT, my mission was to build up our cloud platform so that we can move a lot of workloads at that point. Over there, we saw a big opportunity to move quickly and use new technologies for building better customer experience. But at the same time, already, my task was also to build a number of products. One of them, for example, back in the day was SIXT, which we were just launching or just starting to build. So I've always been focusing also previously to SIXT on both the system engineering piece, if you like, and how or where we run workloads and how we do that efficiently, but also, how do we build applications? How do we solve business problems? So, in a nutshell, I have many passions.
So a full stack engineering leader, yeah?
If you like that term, yes. I would describe myself as a problem solver.
A problem solver. Okay, that's great. Yeah, we all love to solve problems. When did you start solving problems with computers and why?
Well, I definitely started breaking things in the very beginning. I started using computers when I was, I think, second grade. Back in the day, I'm from Bulgaria originally. And I think I got a 32-bit private back in the day, which looks like pretty much like a maybe Apple II-like green screen machine. Obviously got hooked into games. From there, I was interested also how do you build games, got into programming. As I was in school, I realized that building websites was a highly interesting, lucrative, but also profitable business back in the day. So I moved to that. From there, I switched to a lot of other different things, which were, having my interest back in the day, how Linux works, how system engineering works, how do you build protocols, got into C. Then dug myself out of that hole, went into more popular back in the day languages like Python, like at some point Golang. So I've been alternating and changing my hat since then, and also moving in between really hardcore hands-on jobs. Especially I used to like solving problems for scale, but also more leadership, creating or trying to create business kind of jobs, which were also keeping me interested. So yeah, that's my story in a nutshell. I've done about 12 years of different startups. Last I was working in the UK, and then I moved to Germany to join SIXT, and here I am 9 years and going.
And you're actually old enough to still know the center and the marquee tags if you sold websites in the early days, right?
Yeah, I also know what a floppy disk is. And then a clock 56-bit modem, which used to be how you connect to the internet back in the day with this weird noise.
Yeah, that was great. That was great. Yeah. But I think your career is also quite interesting. That you actually stepped up from like working, like being all over the place to the CTO seat now. How did that happen? Like just organically, or?
Pretty much, very, very, very similar to my career before. As I said, I love problem solving, and I've been given a lot of opportunities here at SIXT. As I was iterating on my first missions, I was given additional opportunities, other opportunities to solve problems in other areas. And as the time went, I was also given the opportunity to run the tech business.
So you basically built that platform first, and then this was your masterpiece, and then you rolled it out as a CTO, basically, or is that the story?
Oh no, that happened way back.
Okay,
quite a few years ago. We've been basically using it for our main workloads for many years by now. That's pretty much describes my first 2 years only at SIXT. Afterwards, I focused on other parts of the business, building customer-facing products, or looking into optimizing internal processing systems. So I've been moving into different fields, always trying to see what is the most critical or urgent problem that we've got to focus on as a business. As I said, I'm a naturally curious person, so I definitely like solving different kind of problems. And eventually that path led me to what I'm doing today.
Okay. Before we talk about platform engineering, I'd like to hear your honest thoughts about a legacy tech debt in a 100-year-old company. Like, what is your state there?
Dynamic. So, SIXT started with technology a long time ago. It was actually Eric Sixt, our chairman of the board, who was running the company for as a CEO for 50 years, who put the first lines of code himself in the 80s, and he built quite a few systems. And since then, and under his stewardship, SIXT has been, or started its tech journey, so to speak, and has been focusing on building and solving problems using own software. Even fast forwarding to today, the majority, probably over 90% of the systems that we run are internal, built internally. Because of that, of course, we have different generations of those systems. But I would say probably 10, 12 years ago, we started with the mission to refresh a lot of our tech stack from one perspective, obviously, to get better performance, de-risk certain pieces. But also, our business is constantly evolving, and the expectations of our customers obviously keep rising. So we had to do a better job to capture that. So we ended up rewriting a lot of our technology, and also changing a lot of our business processes as such. By now, 2024, major pieces of that is already done, so to speak. And the majority of our business, or big parts of it, are really written in the last few years. So it's a pretty modern stack. We still have what you would call as legacy running. And those will be parts which are actually doing a pretty good job. Pieces which also business-wise probably have seen less change. And for us, there is just not a big incentive at that point to invest into that. But in terms of, ratios, if you like, the majority of our stack is basically service-oriented architecture written either in Java or Golang. And, that's the stack we run.
And a few pieces of Erich Sixt COBOL code or something like that.
I'm pretty sure some of that is definitely left, but there is more than COBOL, right? We also have, we moved to PHP from COBOL many years ago.
You really used COBOL, okay.
Yeah, we really used COBOL. COBOL is great for certain things still. And if you think about it, in the 80s, it was probably the best choice given what was on the market back in the day, what kind of options you had. But again, we've reduced our footprint there significantly. As I said, that's not a recent movement. A lot of our software moved into PHP back in the day, in a very big monolithic system, which also served us well. At some point, scaling that, but also how the business was going and what the changes were demanded at that point, pushed us to approach it differently, especially that at Sixt we have heavy backend processing as well. So over the years, we moved a lot of that now into more service-oriented architecture to enable our teams to iterate quicker, but also obviously more more suitable languages for the kind of problems we're trying to solve in the face of Golang or in the face of Java.
Do you believe in microservices? Really? Because from my perspective, talking to many CTOs, it kind of evolved from like the micro to more like the mid-sized services in the last years. What is your perspective on that?
Well, honestly, as an engineer back in the day, I used to love the approach. I still do. But even back in the day when, this was the biggest trend, I would say what micro is was hardly defined. It depends who would ask. For some people, that would be some what you would call application functions. And that's what would they describe as micro. And for others, it would be 50, 100,000 line applications. So it really never really had a good definition. Looking at Sixt and how we do things, and coming to your terminology, I would say we also adopted a more mid-sized application approach. But that just has to do with the way we cut teams and the way our problem space exists. The challenge that we have and the fun part of the business is that we operate in over 100 countries. And if you think about it, there is a lot of complexity to satisfy there, both from compliance, customer expectation, how different processes run in different countries. So having extendable business logic is a big part of it. But also on the other side, you've got to build software that has a bit longer life cycle that you can maintain. Otherwise, you just end up in a situation that maintenance takes over 50-60% of teams' roadmaps, and then they don't have enough time to innovate and to meet our customer demands. So our approach was to invest in bigger services and reduce that way the maintenance efforts. We've also invested heavily in automation when it comes to how this service-oriented or microservices architecture is managed and lived. We try to take out a lot of the heavy lifting that comes with it in terms of application lifecycle, monitoring, alerting, and provide it as a service to our engineering teams, because at Sixt it's you build it, you run it kind of a setup. So our engineering teams not only build software and throw it over the fence to platform teams to run, but they run it themselves. And for this to be successful and not to have overly big teams or to spend so much time in heavy lifting, which adds zero business value, and every single team reinventing the hot water, we approach this by standardizing a lot of the scaffolding around running microservices, platform libraries, authorization frameworks, edge layers, as I said, monitoring, and the whole observability stack. All of that is actually provided to our development teams as a service, and it's maintained in many cases either via guilds or central teams, so that they can actually focus on solving customer problems.
So that sounds as if you have like a platform for communication as well, and a concept how people actually figure out the best way to do things through guilds. I just heard that, which is a buzzword from or not buzzword, but it's known from the Spotify model. I'd like to talk about that as well. But I first like to hear about the actual platform. Like what do you do there, and why do you do that? I mean, you mentioned like monitoring, etc. Like, how does it concretely look like?
Well, let's start with the mindset, right? When we were building the foundations of what we call our SIXT platform, which we codenamed Go Orange, for us it was important that we don't just build a platform in isolation, because those approaches usually end up horribly. But as we were building this platform, we were already building a number of new products and migrating some very serious workloads from our Monolith back in the day onto this. So we really approached this end to end, and we always built as much as we needed to solve, the state that we were in product wise. The mindset we wanted to have is, hey, we are going to do a bunch of bets here. It's always a bet in terms of technology, specific tooling, etc. Some of those will end up being right and age well. Others will be completely wrong, and in 1 or 2 years, they would either fail us or we would have to replace them because, they went out of love in the tech community, and for us, maintaining that is just too much effort. Knowing that, we adopted a very modular approach. We wanted to make sure that individual pieces could be taken out with not too much effort, knowing that at some point we are going to have a pretty big scale and complexity, obviously, once 800 people were iterating on that. Our approach was try to solve for the 80%, always batteries included, and for the rest of the 20%, we would always offer APIs so that they can build on top themselves the solution that they would need. And basically, I'll give you a couple of examples for you to understand how that looks like in practice. But this is the approach we took for every single piece of our platform. On more, let's take DevOps. If I give you a more DevOps example, it looks like this. When we were building the foundations of our CI/CD back in the day and how deployment works, etc. How do you take code from a repository to build it, to get it into production and into different staging environments, etc. We built a system that was already integrated into the two main ways back in the day our teams were interacting or deploying and managing their software. That would be ChatOps in our case, which is, you have Slack and then you can deploy your applications, see where they are, what versions are running, etc. over there. And the other way would be Jenkins for us, where people would be building their, CI/CD pipelines directly there and practice, blue-green deployments, whatever the case is. So when we were building our deployment system, it had, from the get-go, hooks and integrations to those two approaches via an API. And also that same API, so that's all the 80%, right? And that same API was also used afterwards for the 20% of our teams who might have a bit different way of, interaction and how they build and deploy software. Like there would be people who, for example, use GitHub, so they would be doing a lot in there and it would be linked to their flows. They would be using the same deployment system API and build something custom on top to make sure that it fits best their use case. But what this allows us to do, if you think about it, is now we have a central piece, this deployment system, which is integrated via API everywhere. And as our platform team decides to iterate on it or change certain pieces of that technology, they can do that. And automatically, everybody gets the benefits, right? Instead of us, having 5-6 different ways of doing that in completely different code bases, maintained by completely different teams. And then, when you have a challenge or when you want to change something fundamentally, you end up spending years in, migrations. This was pretty much the approach we took across the board. The other thing we did,
but sorry to stick with that example. So if you want to get rid of Jenkins, for example, because it's no longer a loved technology around, or does it matter at all? Or would you say does Jenkins, as you mentioned it, as like the core of it, does it matter? And if so, could you replace it because you build an abstraction layer around it, basically with the APIs? Could you move to GitHub Actions, for example?
So if you just look at it from perspective of the deployment experience and tooling that we have, 100%, right? Because if it's gonna be, Argo CD or whatever you pick up there, we would still integrate it to the same deployment system we have if we don't want to change completely our user experience as well. And it will just work. When it comes to the builds, obviously we would have to move them, right? And that's a migration. But it would still allow us to keep the same developer experience because, as I said, there are some people or some teams who would be interacting directly with Jenkins, but there are also many others that just rely on the default automation that we have when you set up a new project, and they only interact with the, so to speak, end user interfaces, being again ChatOps or some graphical UX to deploy their software, and builds happen automatically just based on a default template in Jenkins. And if we were to move that, they would not know a thing because they just don't interact with that system to begin with. From an engineering perspective, the way that looks like is I want to start a new application to solve a particular problem. I basically just create that. I say, hey, I want a new, Golang application in Slack, just to get you through one example. And from that point on, as you add a bunch of metadata, takes about 5 seconds, you get repositories being set up for you. Obviously, a lot of metadata being injected in terms of who is the team owning this application. That relationship already gets created, and that creates also a lot of permissions, who can deploy it, etc. All the build pipelines by default get created in that case. Let's take Jenkins, right? Our core Golang framework would already be prepared in that repository for you to just start iterating on with already hooked up examples of how authorization would look like, etc. The moment you deploy this application, even if it's a hello world, imagine you just do that and you decide to deploy it, you will automatically get instrumentation, observability, all of that stuff set up for you, piped into your channel, dashboards being already shown to you for that application running. That's pretty much the experience we actually have at SIXT, and we've been having for many years. It's nothing new. And our approach is that we continuously iterate on that experience and change things. And because we change that for 100 engineering teams in a way, that's how many we have, we always make sure that through automation, we are able to iterate with it without having our engineering teams to constantly, having to do extra work on that. Obviously, for some things you have to, like we expect our engineering teams, for example, to update their frameworks. That's just as you would hygiene, right? As you would update your libraries. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to changing core platform pieces, we try to make that as least disruptive as possible.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How big is your, you mentioned, or I mentioned, I think that you have 800 people working in tech. How big is the people taking care of the platform?
So, depends which part of it. We have one team, 6-7 people really focusing on the software platform layer, things like service discovery, our core frameworks, authorization libraries, things like this. And then we have probably another 20 which are focusing on cloud automation and basically scaling our more platform infrastructure, things like Commuinities, Kafka, Keycloak, etc. The 3Ks, which are the foundation of a lot of the things we do. So compared to our product engineering teams, our platform team is actually pretty small. Ratio would be something like 1-11 probably. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. If we really look at the core platform, of course, our platform team also is comprised of other engineers who are focusing on a little bit different areas as well, things like security, a few other things, right? But the core platform, what we are just talking about right now, is actually pretty small. And that has been possible because, well, we have fantastic people. So it's not about the numbers. It's really, we have great people who can do a lot. But two, we've also invested heavily from the very beginning to automate everything, or as much as possible, especially those foundational pieces. And that has served us well, looking backwards.
Mm-hmm. So everything is like infrastructure and code,
yes.
Then Kubernetes, then like automations for every layer. And you use a lot of open source, if I see it correctly, like, I don't know, monitoring, for example. We didn't talk about concrete technologies, but there is something running that monitors your system on your premises, basically.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we obviously invest heavily in open source and use a lot of open source technologies. Of course, depending on the problem we're trying to solve and what is the best for us, we also partner a lot with different SaaS vendors. Again, for us, it's the same kind of philosophy we have for how we want to enable our product engineering teams to iterate on customer problems. We obviously also want to enable our platform engineering teams to focus on the things that make a difference for us and not get buried into maintaining, flaky, complex things. So from that perspective, we also try to use as many managed solutions as possible and reduce our efforts there.
So talking about like application performance monitoring, for example, there you use something proprietary, I guess, like New Relic or Datadog or...
Exactly. We actually use Instana.
Okay.
It was a startup which got acquired by IBM recently. But we've had, for example, a relationship with them from, their early years. Product was developed heavily based also on a lot of feedback and challenges we've had, and it fits the way we work pretty well.
Okay. And you then host everything on AWS, I guess, or?
AWS is our preferred cloud provider, and the majority of our workloads are running there. Of course, we also use other cloud providers for certain types of workloads. It always depends what is the best solution for a particular problem, but the majority of our workloads are running AWS.
How do you make sure that cloud cost doesn't like totally explode throughout the time?
That's been a thought from the very beginning. I've been working in that space now for 13, 14 years. So in many different startups, I've seen how that could go, but also what can you do and how you should approach it to make sure that you leverage the best in terms of managed services, in terms of time to market, but also are able to reduce your costs. And that usually boils down to this buzzword that is still probably used in many places, building cloud native. Obviously, it sounds cheesy, but the reality is this is the best way to actually reduce your costs. You've got to know how pricing works in the cloud in terms of the main services that you're using there. B, the approach that companies take and how let's talk like this, integrate cloud technologies into their business, into their teams, both at that point business and technical teams, is usually telling into how much cost they're going to be spending, in my experience. At SIXT, we wanted to do a couple of things, strategy-wise, when it comes to cost. And it's always cost linked to execution, linked to, in the end, solving problems and creating experiences faster. They're kind of interchanged, and we would focus on one or the other depending on, the problem space. What we wanted to do in the beginning was, again, what is our focus? We always start from there as a company. And our focus as a company is to create the best mobility experience for our customers. Right? So from there, when you go into tech, you want to make sure that in the end, your engineers and your teams, they really focus on understanding their customer problems and creating solutions for them, and not get bogged into infrastructures and a gazillion different technologies, getting distracted from that path. But more, they should use technology as much as needed to create that experience. So to achieve that, what we consciously decided early in the day is that we do not want that every single team creates their own cloud space, so to speak, and starts building their own infrastructures. This is an approach that is or can be successful in certain companies under certain conditions. But for us, this was evaluated at that point as heavily distracting. So we decided to encapsulate major pieces of the cloud's complexity into, again, what we call our platform, and have that completely provided as a service to our engineering teams. What does this mean? As an engineer, as I said, you will be responsible to run your application. But we would have created an experience for you where you don't need to care about EC2 instances. Let's take AWS as an example. Like, you don't have to care about servers. You don't have to care about how to scale those servers. They will be there for you, right? You have to care about your application. You have to care about the performance of this application and understand that intrinsically. And you have to assume that everything else will be there for you. And that's pretty much how the responsibilities are split, and you basically just deploy into Kubernetes, and the rest just works for you, right? There are a number of patterns and automations when it comes to how you expose things to the internet and how you make sure that in the end you have full observability of who is calling your application, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But again, all automated for you, prepared for you. So you just use it. You just deploy as if you do, for example, on Heroku, and that's it. The other point was, obviously, there is easier and harder handover points. One of the hardest one for us that we took a few years to solve, it took actually a specific technology to emerge before we were able to do so, was how do you deal with persistence? And how do you automate that as an experience, right?
I just wanted to ask about persistence, yeah.
I knew you were going to go there, right? Because, running a container on Kubernetes is easy. How do you do persistence, right? How is this not a ticket? And for us, it was a ticket for a long time, because we tried many different ways. Our platform teams would be using Terraform to automate their infrastructures. And we've, again, iterated on that also a lot. But regardless, we provided trainings. We got some engineering teams who are more, let's say, infrastructure savvy into that. Them just start opening PRs into Terraform for infrastructure. It always felt unnatural and against, again, the pattern that we were trying to create. So for a few years, when you need a database, or database schemas, etc., you would have to create a ticket, and we were very annoyed because of that. But at some point, a couple of years ago, we finally were able to address this problem and create again, or use our default recipe to solve it, which is create an API and integrate that into everything else that we do in terms of automation, so that our engineers can request S3 buckets, they can request RDS instances, they can request schema changes and run them themselves without having to go through ticketing systems and things like that. Mm-hmm. This was actually pretty pivotal. We probably reduced the ticket-like interactions between our teams by probably 20-30%, which is big.
But just to understand it fully, you ended up using AWS native services for that, right? For persistence.
We've always been using AWS from day one, AWS native services. But the missing glue at that point was a technology called Crossplane. Maybe you have heard about it. Because what it allowed us to do was, from one side, it allowed our platform teams to basically embed best practices when it comes to how we want to provision databases, how we want to provision S3 buckets, making sure versioning is always enabled, making sure certain security considerations are always there, right? All those things that are standard in our company and we want to enforce, and we want to make sure that they're there from the get-go. But from the other side, it allowed us to expose a well-defined API through Kubernetes for that to our engineering teams, which is how they interact with the system today to begin with. So in a natural way for them, so to speak, instead of them going into Terraform code, understanding Terraform code, running Terraform code, etc. So this was the missing glue for us, which really clicked because, again, how we provide, how we automate the whole thing is via APIs. And this allowed us to create this experience which felt so natural for our engineers. And today they are able to do all those things themselves as well.
And do you think it's smart to rely on AWS services in long term, or do you consider every once in a while? I mean, it's also evolving, right? Persistence in Kubernetes and like great Helm charts for Postgres, etc. Did you ever think about that as well, or is it just a too big thing to deal with?
How do you mean that? In the sense
well, you could theoretically also host your own databases, right? You could also spin up your own instances for databases instead of relying on AWS services.
That's Commuinities. Well, our strategy in general with cloud is that we really focus on standard services, let's go it that way. It's much easier to manage, hence, keeping your team slim and reducing the complexity for them. B, much easier to upgrade. So to give you a concrete example, we have a default go-to for 99% of our use cases. If we are going to go for SQL-like persistence, we would go for Postgres. Running RDS because again that fits into the way we do things, but it will be Postgres. There will be not 10 flavors of SQL solutions running around there. And if we go for a NoSQL, again, there will be one single choice. And that's how we do it. If at some point we decide to change something fundamentally, it makes it super easy, right? Because we don't have to think about all the quirks of all the different services that may exist. Maybe for some more proprietary things, there is also no alternatives, which makes your life very hard. In this way, we keep complexity low. And as I said, we solve 99% of our problems. There is always 1% where there is something very unique. But at this point of time, obviously, first we challenge ourselves. Did we understand our problem? Is it so different and uncommon what we're trying to achieve? Would the effort in adopting this new technology or this special technology really make the user experience better? If the answer is yes, then we do it. And of course, if the answer is no, we abandon and we go back into a standard way of doing things.
Understood. And do you have how do you think about platforms, proprietary platforms that come out these days, like I don't know, Humanitech, for example, is a German company that actually builds a developer platform as a service, an IDP basically. How do you think about that? Do you see your product or your core being competitive with that? Like, don't people ask for, I don't know, a nice interface where they can configure the instances they would like to run? Do you have some sort of a layer that at least allows you to configure all the infrastructure that you actually need for your services? Or how do I have to imagine that? I know it's a very broad question, but
very broad question. We have, because we started 8 years ago, right? And as I said, we have insanely strong teams, and we're very proud of them. We have insane amount of UX as well, okay. And insane amount of automation, right? So again, you can see visually all your applications. You can see all the libraries that are running in production into those applications that you have. You have end-to-end tracing, seeing all the different applications calling you what you are calling. Obviously, any kind of golden signals you can imagine. I'm not only talking the things from the IPM. I mean, there's a very broad space. And at this point, again, you can always do better and we keep iterating. But at this point, I'm not sure there is something heavily missing. And on the other side, we've spent 8 years in relentless optimization, which is, again, how we keep also our cloud costs significantly on the lower side. Every piece of our stack is heavily optimized for purpose and for how we run applications. And because of this symbiotic relationship between our application architecture, like there is one way of service communication, there is very certain way of how we expose APIs, what kind of APIs we expose to the outside, to our mobile applications, to third parties, to websites, etc. Those standards, they were defined for each other, so to speak. So it would be very hard for us to just take something from the outside, plug it in, and get better results at this point of time. Mm-hmm. This being said, we constantly screen the market for nuggets, which we can integrate into our platform or replace pieces of it. By now, looking 8 years back, what we started with has drastically changed in a very seamless way. But probably Kubernetes, that's why we call it eternal electric case. It's just an eternal joke. Like Kubernetes, Kafka, and Keycloak are the three technologies that, aged well and survived. Those were massive bets back in the day, all of them. When we chose Kubernetes, again, Mesos was still the more widely used approach for Kubernetes for container workload scheduling, or at that point, application scheduling. Nomad was up and coming, right? The choice of Kubernetes was a bet, a huge one. And we were just lucky, right? We chose well, so to speak, but in the end, you never know. And other technologies did not age well. And they were, they faded into oblivion, they were changed, and we kept iterating on that, and we keep doing that year after year. So, yeah, this is where we stand. Just taking a platform from the outside, which is a Swiss Army knife, and plugging it in. At this point of time, again, given the amount of years of experience that we've put into it, would yield probably worse results. Plus, by now, we're at the point where the advancements, especially when it comes to AI, is starting to get super interesting, because it will be the thing that would allow us to go to do the next steps. Now that we have well-defined frameworks for our core applications, for how we build, back office UX, design systems, all those things. What we are looking for at the moment is how do we train models on that, or use RAG, right, for and use LLMs to speed up the creation of some of those boilerplates and start even going higher level and start solving more basic to medium problems automatically. Like what happens in our business often is we create a new product or a new feature, a new experience in a certain area. The moment you launch this at scale, again, millions of customers, many different countries, a lot of stakeholders, it doesn't matter if it's internal or external, the first thing that people would ask for is, hey, I need my analytics, which by now we have in a pretty good automated state. But B, I need a back office application to basically be able to configure this and that for the different countries, all those things. We have a gazillion of those things. And as I said, we have a framework how we build them as quickly as possible. But, the next iteration for us is, as a business owner, product owner, etc., or an engineer, I want to create this back office application which shows me X and Y and Z in a tabular view based on those well-defined APIs. Go, right? And this should be up and running in 30 seconds.
That would be great. I mean, the good old admin interface is
exactly
really very hard to find a good one, right? Like good tech stack for that.
Exactly. And for example, for a couple of years, because again, we started with that stuff many years ago, eventually, for example, Backstage got open source. There are a couple of others nowadays in terms of frameworks for building back office applications. So we've been, hey, do we move? Do we migrate? Does it make sense? Because, internally we have the same thing. Do we open source our thing? So we've been busy a little bit with that. But now in the last year and a half, we are more like, hey, actually forget about it. We have well-defined design systems. We have well-defined frameworks, back-end, front-end, all of it. Let's just focus on how we faster iterate on them, right? That's pretty much the stage we're at this point of time.
So to understand it correctly, like your internal application stack, like to build internal applications, like many people use like, I don't know, Retool or I don't know, in Rails, Active Admin or stuff like that. Like, is that proprietary? Like, did you build it yourself? And now you're using LLMs to basically let product owners express their interest. Hey, I want to build an user interface to I don't know, manage users or manage cars, right? Is that's
pretty much it? That's a step we want to take, because again, if we think about it, by now we have I don't know, hundreds of those things running around, and much of the components, what makes a back office tool, for example, they're kind of the same, right? There are, I don't know, 5, 10, 15 different components that we use across the board. Mm-hmm. And we have, again, also for our back office world, like a framework when it comes to user authentications, permissions, all those more common things like color coding, whatever you want. And now we are at the stage of, hey, instead of just building them manually, how can we speed this up, right? If you think about it, it's more like, hey, if I start a startup tomorrow, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do no code / low code immediately, right, to solve a particular problem. I would not be building those things from scratch.
Yeah.
No way, right? And we love this experience. We are way too complex for that experience, unfortunately, right? In terms of our scale and systems that need to be integrated, complexity of the process. But luckily, everything in-house is standardized. So it's like, hey, can we offer a no-code / low-code experience internally based on our stack because it's well-defined? Again, all of it. Standards are there. Those standards are written in code, and it's a textbook case for LLM experience. And this is one of the areas that we are looking into at the moment, where we believe we will get pretty good results. Obviously, again, we heavily focus our data science efforts usually, again, on solving business problems. But when it comes to just looking technology-wise for how we can speed up our execution, this will be one of those things that is super interesting for us.
Is that the biggest change or innovation you see happening in your platform particularly, or do you see other things ahead that excite you?
Oh, there are many things that excite me. I'm a very, that one for sure will be super fun, and it's just a clear business case, right? It's just an obvious one.
Sure.
But there are a few others which are equally interesting. Again, for me, it's super difficult to just focus on the platform at that point of time, because I just look at our whole business and technology landscape, and there is just so much happening there. We are building some pretty cool complete digital car rental experiences, where we really allow our customers to go through the whole experience digitally. Which is super cool, and there is so much technology behind it, and it's a really challenging thing to scale worldwide. Then we are doing some super crazy stuff when it comes to our website architecture and experience. We probably have the fastest website in the industry in terms of user experience. It's all actually built on micro front-end architecture, which we started looking into that a couple of years ago, and we're probably one of the few who really has, at that scale, that kind of technology powering it behind it. And for us, it's working pretty well. We are interacting with our mobile applications via gRPC, which was for us a big achievement, and again, a massive speed up when it comes to experience, but also reduced so much complexity, because in the past, we've adopted gRPC for service-to-service communication internally, but we would always had to have translation layers for our external clients. And now we can just go native, which removes a complete layer in terms of complexity, which makes me excited. Again, I get easily excited all the time. So.
What is the coolest technology that you recently discovered and that excited you, as you seem to be very excited about things? What is the craziest thing that you saw recently?
The craziest thing?
Oh, well, the best thing. Let's not say the craziest, but the best thing, that you annoy your friends with. Hey, I discovered this. Use it. I always have those moments.
I think I'm particularly nagging when it comes to Midjourney. I'm a big fan, I have to say. Like, I knock all my friends about it because, again, for me, for example, personally, I just use it almost every day for gifts, for just sending funny pictures around, or for creating presentations, etc. I just love this technology. And the fact that, because when it comes to creativity on that side, art, I'm so horrible. I'm just horrible. And this thing allows me to just describe what I want and puts all my crazy thoughts in 15 seconds into something tangible. And I don't know, I've tried obviously a lot of other LLMs for the same, but with Midjourney specifically, I think we have a very like-minded thinking when it comes to final outcomes. So I'm particularly happy with it. Have you used it?
Yeah, absolutely. I like whenever I touch it, I think I'm too old for Discord. That's my main problem with it. How do you deal with that?
Oh man, I love this. I've been in Discord before Midjourney. I think that's why. Again, I told you I started with gaming. I never mentioned that I stopped it, right? Actually, I never did. I'm still, even if I obviously don't have too much time for games, I'm in probably, 15 different communities there still. And for me, it was natural. I love Discord.
So, but Slack in your company, Slack is still the key tool for communication, or?
When it comes to engineering communication, yes.
Okay.
We use Teams when it comes to video and when it comes to really conferences and calls and things like this. But when it comes to chat and automation and engineering, it's
sure. The good old problem, right? Like everyone uses Outlook in enterprise organizations and Teams, and then like the digital natives really want to use Slack and ideally, I don't know, Google Workspace.
Yeah, well, I think in this case, there is just no way you can go, or at least we can go and say, hey, it just makes all the sense in the world to choose one tool. We try to use one tool for the job. Obviously, the whole tooling space there keeps evolving. And at some point, we might arrive at a moment where one tool really solves all the use cases. But at this point of time, I think the experience is vastly different. Like, when it comes to video, I think Teams is just a fantastic experience. Or Zoom, right, as well, is pretty good. I think Slack is Discord as well, by the way. They're pretty good when it comes to chat. And you can't compare those two. Well, there are a couple of new open source things. Maybe that's unfair at this point of time, but
there have to be like a few things. Like I really don't want Salesforce to mess up Slack. I love Slack, so I hope that like it plays out well.
Well, we see how it goes, right?
Yes.
But so far, again, we in engineering we use it heavily.
Okay. Understood. Just like a final like loop back to your platform ideas and communication, as we're talking about communication right now. Like you mentioned guilds, or we briefly touched guilds at the very beginning. Like how does that work at SIXT?
The way I mentioned it was not like in the context of what you may refer to as the Spotify guild model. Nothing like that.
Yeah,
I think it was the best term to describe what we're doing. So, as I've told you, we have standard frameworks, standard libraries for certain things, because again, we definitely don't want to have 10 different authorization frameworks running in a company, right? And then the question comes, how do you keep iterating their bug fixes, new features, etc.? Obviously, we have a core platform team that is just focusing on that landscape. But as I also mentioned, our teams by standard, they're pretty thin. And how do you maintain something like this all the time, right? So That's one problem. The second problem when you build things like this, which are so close to developer experience, is that you risk that what you start creating for your engineering team becomes foreign for them, right? Becomes just too far away, something someone else is deciding. So how do you get their feedback, their experience, their drive and energy into what you're building? And not have a silo where there shouldn't be one, right? So for those areas, for those topics, we have a more what we call internally a guild approach. That the way you have to think about it is think about it like an open source project, right? There is a community of people from our platform teams, from our product engineering teams that are owners of this thing, so to speak. They co-own it, they iterate on it together, and they have a process internally how they version it, how they develop it further, what kind of features they allow into it, what kind of features they disallow. This is how some of those things that we have, especially the ones which are at the boundary between our product and platform engineering organizations, are maintained. And I think this is a very successful model because it allows us to iterate jointly on this. And it reflects well the ownership nature of it, right?
Like besides the code that is written, there's obviously like also a Slack channel where people exchange and regular meetings, etc.
Yeah.
Or is it okay?
There are weekly, bi-weekly, monthly gatherings on the topic. They have a Slack channel where they hang out all together. Pretty standard.
Okay, understood. So slowly coming to the end, what is the top thing you recently learned and you want to pass on to other CTOs?
I'm not sure if it's recent, but I think as CTOs, the biggest challenge we have is that we have one leg on the technical side and one leg on the business side. And both of those areas are very noisy, right? So one thing that has served me well, and I think it's just very important for that role, is to be able to filter out the noise and focus. Because otherwise you can easily get distracted and overwhelmed. There is so much happening in the technology space, right? It's hard to keep track of all the things that are going on, being announced, new technologies, new ways of doing things, hype, whatever the case is, right? And then, of course, on the business side is the other fun, right? New opportunities, new deals, new way of doing things, new business models, process optimization. The endless things that you can be spending your time on. So, in the middle of that, obviously you have your teams that you have to pay attention to the people you work with. So it is definitely very noisy. And my recommendation, and the way I try to structure my time always is, filter out the noise. Make sure you make up the biggest amount of time to the things you deeply care about. And for the rest, build yourself a structure, a network, however you can, to filter out the signals and, leave the noise out.
So you have focus time in your calendar?
Every day.
How much?
2 hours.
Cool.
I try to not sacrifice that.
Cool. And something like a no meeting day or?
No. And world is dynamic. I would love to have every day no meeting day, but that's not the world we live in. But on the other side, I'm pretty premeditated when it comes to what kind of meetings I take and why do we have to meet at all? Because otherwise you just become a puppet of your own calendar, right? It starts driving you. It starts telling you what you need to be doing next week, a month from now as well. And I think this is a massive threat, if you like. It's important that it goes the other way around. So
you have to defend. You have to defend your calendar.
You have to defend your time. And again, I try to have focus time every single day. But other than that, this is the piece I try to have non-negotiable with myself. the rest of the hours, I fight hard for as well, right? I don't just allow it to take over. I try to make as much space for the things that are important and for me to think and for me to, make decisions and look deep into, topics that are important versus, just having a meeting which was organized 3 months back for a topic, right? If you think about it, and if you really live as, it's day one, when you wake up, you have a pretty clear idea how this day should go and what is really important to happen. And that really could be the thing that, even if you set up this meeting 3 months ago, that thinking can't be, more accurate than what's happening today. That's how I personally think about it.
Cool. Yeah, I really share those thoughts, and I think it is really hard to really establish that, right?
It is really brutally difficult, right?
Yeah,
it is brutally difficult.
Yeah, like people always like attack your focus time.
Sure.
I still have a little surprise and an outro question for you. So I want to invite you to a ride. So I got this special DeLorean edition that Eric Sixt gave me. I think he's using it quite a lot, and I want to invite you for a ride back in the days and travel back in time to the year 2011 when you worked as a project manager at Pinewood Technologies, and we now let's imagine we now travel back like with that DeLorean, the doors open. And you can now observe yourself back in the days, and you now would have a chance to whisper something to your younger self, like few years younger self. What would you whisper into a young Boyan's ears?
Those were the times when I was doing my master's. I think that was actually. I was doing this at the end of it. Fun times. A lot of partying.
Gaming.
Some gaming. A lot of partying. It was those times. I guess reflecting better on that, probably I would have whispered to myself to stay curious. It was curiosity which kept driving me over the years, and it's one of those things that, it created who I am. It led me through many different rabbit holes, but it also exposed me to so many different ways of both doing business, but also so many different technologies. And even when I was at Pinewood, right, at that point I was actually part of the platform team, of the network team even, and managing a monitoring project, I think. And that was such a good fun, and I learned so much. And it is the curiosity which kept driving me from afterwards problem to problem. So yeah, probably this is what I would have mentioned to my younger self.
Maybe it happened, right? So as you're still curious,
maybe
you really traveled back and whispered it to your younger self.
Yeah, but when you at that point I had tried already a couple of things or a couple of businesses myself and failed on them, right? That was before my master's even. And I was, as Pinewood at that point was probably the biggest company I ever worked with to date. And I was just, when I joined them, I think had to shut down my website stuff. I was just thinking to myself, is it really time for you to man up and get a real job, right? And just start specializing, right? Just start specializing in one thing instead of, being overly curious and going from one topic to another. But yeah, I think I obviously did not follow up that thought back in the day. Right after this, I went into a completely different business again. that I had no clue about. And I think that served me well over the years, but I certainly had my doubts if this is the right path for me.
Understood. Well, thanks a lot for sharing your thoughts. It was really an interesting discussion, Boyan. And I hope we can continue at a certain point with a different topic. Really loved the discussion with you. Hope to meet you in person at a certain point.
Looking forward. Thanks for having me, Toby.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to the Alphalist podcast. If you like this episode, share it with friends. I'm sure they love it too. Make sure to subscribe so you can hear deep insights into technical leadership and technology trends as they become available. Also, please tell us if there is a topic you would like to hear more about or a technical leader whose brain you would like us to pick. Alphalist is all about helping CTOs getting access to the insights they need to make the best decisions for their company. Please send us suggestions to CTO@alphalist.com. Send me a message on LinkedIn or Twitter. After all, the more knowledge we bring to CTOs, the more growth we see in tech. Or, as we say on Alphalist, accumulated knowledge to accelerate growth. See you in the next episode.